안녕하세요. 매스랑 라이팅을 담당하고 있는 브라이언 튜터입니다. 오늘은 저희가 전반적으로 한번 수학이 어떻게 달라졌는지, 여기 어떤 전략을 사용해야 하는지, 그리고 실제로 이 컬리지 보드에서 만든 프랙티스 테스트 문제를 몇 개를 좀 풀어볼 수 있도록 할게요. 저희가 오늘 처음 만나는 만큼 제 소개를 먼저 간단하게 좀 했으면 하는데요. 제 work experience에 대해서 먼저 좀 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 저는 이제 컬리지 시절 University of Pennsylvania에서 Lauder Institute Think Tank Analyst로 근무를 했고 거기서 이제 Data Analyst로서 이제 근무를 했습니다. 다음 저는 모건 스탠리라는 은행의 자회사인 Institutional Shareholder Service에서 Research Analyst로 근무를 한 경력이 있어요. 그리고 최근까지는 프라이빗 에퀴티 사모펀드에서 기업을 통째로 사고 파는 이 M&A 일을 했습니다. 여러분들께서 제 qualification, 제 경력에 대해서, 제 자격 사항에 대해서 좀 많이 궁금해 하실 것 같은데요. 저는 New SAT, 처음 나왔을 때 이 paper based test 2400점에서 1600점으로 넘어갈 때 그때 1회 시험을 이제 자습, 혼자서 공부를 해서 응시를 했고 그 결과 99% percentile plus 그리고 그때 당시 에세이가 있었는데 에세이에서 만점을 받게 되었습니다. 여러분들께서 나중에 이제 대학교에 진학을 할 때 에세이가 굉장히 중요한데 이 부분 제가 좀 많이 도와드릴 수 있을 것 같아요. 이 다음이 이 IBT TOEFL 잘 아시죠? 여기서는 만점을 받게 되었고 YBM Grandmaster라는 타이틀을 취득했습니다. YBM Grandmaster를 취득하기 위해서는 이 TOEIC Writing, TOEIC Speaking까지 전체 다 만점을 받게 되었어요. 그리고 마지막으로 이제 National Debate, 제가 이제 전국 단위의 영어 토론 대회를 많이 나가게 됐는데 거기서도 이제 1등 한 경력이 되게 많습니다. 나중에 Debate 또는 Model UN에 관심이 있으시면 언제든지 저를 또 찾아와 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 자, 이제 오늘 어떤 걸 하게 될 건지에 대해서 한번 살펴볼 건데요. 저희는 이제 오늘 매스가 어떻게 달라졌는지, 이거를 접근할 때 어떤 전략을 써야 하는지, 그리고 이제 실제 문제를 몇 개를 좀 풀어볼 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 자, 그러면 한번 오버뷰를 한번 볼 수 있도록 하겠습니다. SAT가 디지털화되면서 어떻게 달라졌는지 한번 알아볼게요. 자, 이제 전 영역에 계산기 사용하는 게 가능해요. 예전에는 우리가 cal 그리고 non-cal 이렇게 나눠졌었는데 이제는 전 영역에 사용이 가능하다. 계산기는 여러분들께서 평상시에 이제 쓰시던 그 계산기를 쓸 수가 있고 또 SAT 그 프로그램 내에 있는 계산기를 사용하셔도 좋습니다. 자, 두 번째 되게 여러분들께서 학생들이 많이 질문하신 부분인데요. You're able to use scratch paper. 이 연습장 사용하는 게 가능해요. 물론 여러분들께서 들고 가는 게 아니라 여기 시험장에서 이 프록터가 나눠주는 그 시험지, 이 연습지를 사용해야 하는데 이거는 나중에 우리가 이제 문제를 풀면서 정말 중요하니 꼭 이거는 참고를 해주시기 바래요. Next, the format. 시간은 많이 줄어들었어요. 이제 총 70분. 35 minutes for Model 1 and 35 minutes for Model 2. The number of problems, 총 문제 개수는 54개. Model 1에 이제 27개, 그리고 마찬가지 Model 2에 또 마찬가지 이제 27개가 되겠습니다. 자, 그리고 이제 조금 디지털 SAT로 넘어가면서 달라진 게 뭐냐면 Now the test is adaptive. Depending on how well you do on the first test, the first model, the difficulty of the second model adapts. So let's take a look at how this is going to look like. So let's say you got 16 to 20 questions right on model 1, the first model, the first 27 questions. You'll automatically move over to the hard questions. Let's say you got 20 right on the first model, 27 on the first model, and then you get full marks for the second model, you'll be able to get an 800. 하지만 let's say you get a composite score of about 12 to 16. Let's say you got a couple questions wrong. You'll next transition into the medium module. In this case, no matter how well you do on the second module, you'll only be able to get a score of about a 720. 이해되셨을까요? And lastly, let's say you were to get a fairly lower score. Let's say 한 반타작, 반 정도만 나왔다, 맞췄다. You'll move on to the easy module. In the easy module, you'll be able to only get approximately a 620 even if you do get all of the questions right. So from this we can tell that scoring very well on the first module is going to be very important for your actual full score. 그래서 되게 좀 재밌는 케이스가 있는데요. There was a student who got an 800 on the paper-based test. We took one of the practice tests and the score that he got was a 720. Now, how can that be? It turns out the student got 3 to 4 questions wrong on the first module and then got a perfect score on the second module. Because he wasn't able to progress onto the first module, the hardest module, his score was capped at a 720. 자, 이렇게 되면 너무나도 이제 아쉽겠죠? This is the difference between getting into the school that you've been dreaming of. This is the difference between you getting a scholarship and paying for your entire 4 years study. 너무 아쉽잖아요. 이 쉬운 문제를 틀려서 이 어려운 문제로 넘어가지 못해서 여러분들이 원하는 점수를 못 받는 거. What we can tell from this case study is that we need to be what? We need to be risk averse. 이 쉬운 문제를 틀리는 게 생각보다 좀 치명적일 수가 있다. We need to be valuing accuracy over speed. 자, 우리 한국 학생들이 되게 이 수학을 잘하기 때문에 sometimes they'll rush through the questions. Sometimes they will get a bit hasty. Sometimes they will just skim over the easier questions. In the past, this would have been forgiven with maybe a minimal penalty, maybe getting a 790, getting a 780. But now the test is going to penalize you with a much more severe consequence. Hence, 선생님이 조금 전에 말했던 your scratch paper, it's going to be very important that you utilize this scratch paper to write out all of your work so that when we review the test, when we review our work, we're going to be able to make sure that we don't make any mistakes. And if we did, we're going to be able to fix those problems very quickly. So this naturally leads us to the strategy, and I'd like to talk about the macro and the micro. So 2 levels. 이 2단계를 나눠서 한번 설명해 볼게요. 자, when it comes to the macro, we're going to spend about 1 minute per question so that we have time to review all of our questions. As long as you have not moved on to your second model, you'll be able to review all of your answers in the first module. Next, when we're factoring this in, we're going to seek perfection. It's more important that you get everything right than getting the harder questions right. Of course, we are going to get the harder questions right, but I'd like to emphasize again, getting the easier questions wrong is going to be, it's going to penalize you severely with this new test. And what we need to focus on is what is the question asking for? It turns out over the last couple months, studying the new SAT, a lot of the students who would get 800 on the previous test, they'll get these new seemingly easy questions wrong. 하지만 선생님과 수업을 이제 진행하면서 이 쉬운 문제들이 어떤 쉬운 문제고 어떤 유형의 문제인 건지 그리고 이걸 어떻게 접근해야 하는지 한번 차근차근 볼 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 자, moving on to the micro level, of course, at school, your teachers probably have been drilling this on and on. We are going to utilize these 3 strategies. We are going to plug our values in. We have our calculator throughout the entire 2 modules. We will be able to plug it in as long as we have the equations right. Also, we are going to write out our work. I've been emphasizing this again and again. We want to be risk averse and prioritize accuracy over speed. 이 문제를 이제 식을 다 풀어 나가게 되면 당연히 시간이 조금 더 걸리겠지만 우리는 실수를 하면 안 된다. Risk averse, staying safe is going to be the key word over here. And lastly, mathematical jargon. 우리 한국 학생들이 이제 수학을 굉장히 좀 잘하는데 이 영어로 돼 있는 이 수학 용어를 몰라서 틀리는 경우가 보니까 굉장히 좀 많았어요. So we're going to study specific jargon that pertains to American math. Examples of this would be calculating miles to feet, the mode. 한국어로는 우리 채빈 값이죠. The medium. Examples of this would be the medium, which is 중앙값. And I'm sure you guys know this, but the mean, the average. 평균. So, during our class, we're going to go through all of these mathematical jargon, and I'm sure as long as you have this in your arsenal, you will be able to just go through this very quickly. 자, 이제 실제 college board에서 그 출제한 문제들을 몇 개를 좀 풀어보도록 할게요. So the actual questions. We'll first take a look at maybe the easier questions where we can really observe when being careful about what the question's asking for is really important. So this is the first question, and 이 오답률이 무려 50%나 됐던 문제예요. 근데 되게 재밌는 게 this was question number 1. It seems very easy. It seems almost middle school 중학교 maybe 1학년 or 2학년 math. But it's a bit tricky. And this 오답률 50%, this accuracy of only 50% was from kids who already were steadily getting a math score of higher than a 780. So if we take a look at this, let's look at what the question's asking for and what values that the question's giving. 1, rides his bike at an average rate of 5.7 miles per mile. Function M models the number of minutes it will take one to ride X miles. So what we are trying to find is find the function where we can tell how many minutes it will take. So a lot of the students will choose answered A as the answer. But I'd like to ask you guys, what does this mean? Is this the answer that we're trying to look for? If you take a look at this, basically what this question, what this models is how many minutes, instead of asking how many miles, how many minutes it's going to take. Basically, for this equation, we get how many miles per minute. If we go for X miles, for 5.7 minutes. But this is not what we're trying to look for. We're trying to look for how many minutes it's going to take us. So for this, what we simply need to do is we need to utilize this to get this. If we are riding X miles and we're going to take 5.7 minutes per mile, the speed being fixed, the answer is going to be D, not A. Now, this is a question that also, strangely enough, 50% of the high scorer kids got wrong. Let's take a look at the problem. The equation gives us the speed S in miles per hour of a certain car T seconds after it begins to accelerate. What is the speed in miles per hour 5 seconds after it began to accelerate? So some kids will take this as an acceleration question and deviate this, differentiate this. However, in this case, we just need to keep things simple. It's a simple question based on this equation. All we need to do is input 5 seconds into t to get our overall speed. In this case, it's going to be inputting 5 into the equation, which will get us 55. Some people will simply go too deep, differentiate this, or input 3 as the answer, but let's keep things simple. We just need to plug it in. Our next equation is an example of a question where it'd be safe for us to simply write out our work. I'm sure that you can even probably do this mentally, but we want to be efficient. We want to increase the efficacy as much as we can. In this case, we're going to write it down so that when we're reviewing, we can only use maybe about 2 or 3 seconds to just go over this question. This is going to get us 8, and because it's cubed, we only have one answer. In this case, it is going to be 2, which will get us A. Many kids will simply breeze through this, scribble, but it is best if we have this equation written out so that immediately when we're going through this, it's a matter of a second to go through this question. Moving on. So this is where things start to get tricky. We're trying to infer what number 5 in this context means. It's 5 times 1.8 by the power of t, and we're trying to infer exactly what 5 in this context means. So for this, mapping it out is a strategy that I would like to use. So let's keep things simple. Let's say the start of our line is when we just started, and the end of this line is when t is 1, which is 1 year after we started this. So which of the following is the best interpretation of the number 5 in this context? Let's try case by case. Let's say we put 0 into this, we're going to get 5. 0 into the equation equals 5. And let's say it's 1 year later, 1 year after our restaurant opens up, it's going to be 5 times 1.8. Now, having mapped this out, let's take the answers one by one. Our choice is one by one. A, the estimated number of employees when the restaurant opened. If we go back to our map, when we put 0 into the equation, when the restaurant simply opened up, we get 5. So this would, in fact, be the correct answer. But just for the sake of practicing, let's look at the other choices. B, the increase in the estimated number of employees each year. Now, this is not going to be what 5 means, but for us to express this is going to look something like 1.8t minus 1.8t minus 1 for all values t that are bigger than 1, which would give us exactly the increase in every employee per year. The number of years the restaurant has been open would be t, and the percent increase would look something like for all values the same, again, that are bigger than 1. So in this question, the number 5 is going to be the number of employees when the restaurant opened. 자, moving on. So some questions that we need to really know what the mathematical jargon means to solve. So our first question, it seems very easy. The graph of 9x minus 10y equals 19 is translated down 4 units down the xy plane. What is the x-coordinate of the x-intercept of the resulting graph? We need to first check what translated down means. We need to know what the xy plane is and what the x-intercept really means. 자, 이 translated down은 이 평행이동. The xy plane would be xy 평면. And the x-intercept with the x절편. Right. So knowing this, all we need to do is move the equation down after we organize it. How are we going to do this for something like this? It's a very standard equation. Basically, on the graph, it's going to look something like this. Something like this. Easy. 그래서 한번 직접 해보자면 minus 10y plus 9x equals 19. Y equals minus 19 over 10. So all we need to do is minus 4 to this, which will get us y equals 10 minus 59 over 10. For us to get the x-intercept, y에다가 0을 넣으면 되고, if we put 0 for y, we're going to get and then if we're going to divide the left-hand side of the equation by 9 over 10, we get 59 over 9 for our equation. So this was fairly easy, but what was required of us was to recognize what these mathematical terms meant. We know them in Korean, but we simply need to revise them in English. And in class, we're going to go over the many equations. And plus, because we have this written down, when we're going through the questions, we're going to be able to make sure and double check that our answers are indeed correct. Moving on to our next question, we now need to know what a down payment is. So if you look at this, John paid a total of $165 for a microscope. He made a down payment of $37 and $16 a month for P months. Which of the following equations represent this situation? A lot of the students did not get this right because they did not know what a down payment is. So basically, to explain utilizing an example of a car, 이 down payment 선수금 그러면 대략 이제 어떤 거냐면 예를 들면 2천만 원짜리 자동차가 있다면 let's say we do a down payment of 1,000만 원, 1,000. Then, for over a period of n months, we'd be paying 1,000 over n months. So let's say we were to be paying this over a period of 10 months. Then for each month, we'd be paying 100 each month. So it is a lump sum that we pay first, and then for all specified months, we're going to divide what's left over from that. So if we take a look at this, a total of $165. but we paid $37 as a down payment. Then our total sum is going to add up to 37 plus $16 monthly payments for P times. This needs to add up to 165. Hence, the answer is naturally C. So some students would choose A because they did not know what a down payment was. They thought it was something that they're going to receive after the entire payment, but that's not the case. It's a sum that is deducted from the total sum. It's not a reservation price. It's not money that you get back after. It's something that actually deducts from the total payment that you're going to make. Moving on. Okay. So in this question, it's a question that requires, it's a stat question. It's a question that requires us to know what the median is, what the standard deviation is. And in some questions, I've actually seen a couple of these questions where they ask what the mode is. But in this case, we do not need to know what this is. So the median in this case is a 중원값. And the standard deviation is 표준 편차. So for the SAT, we do not need to get exactly what the standard deviation is. We do not need to calculate this. What we only need to do for these standard deviation questions is to recognize the spread. If the data sets, the values are more spread out, it means that there's a higher level of standard deviation. If it's closer together, it's going to be of a lower standard deviation. So as we're talking about this, let's just check this out. The standard deviation for this data set, these two data sets, because B is more spread out, B is going to have the higher standard deviation, and A, because it's more centralized to the median value, it's going to have a lower standard deviation. If we take a look at 2, the standard deviation of A and B are in fact not equal, and B has a higher standard deviation. So B would be incorrect. We can take away this and this. Now we have to simply check whether 1 is correct or not. So the median is basically the value that is right in the middle. Right now, if we count this up, we're going to have 13 values. We just need to check for the 7th value. If we look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sorry, it's going to be the 여기서 이건 한 10초 정도는 좀 잘라줄 수 있을까요?
네네.
네네. 그래서 계속
제가 나중에 편집을
네.
이제 붙여서 이렇게 여기까지
네. 그러면
드리면 그때 봐서 여기는 잘라주세요.
네, 알겠습니다. 그럼 다시 시작할게요. So if we look at this, we have a total of 17 values. Then we simply need to look at the 9th value from the bottom. If we look at this, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Our median in this case is going to be 13. Accordingly, this data set also has 17 values. We simply need to find the 9th value, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It turns out the two medians in both of these data sets are equal. Hence, we only have A as the answer. D is incorrect. 자. Now, moving on to the next question. It's a right triangle. So in this case, what this is a 직각 이등변 삼각형, which has a perimeter of 94 plus 94 root 2 inches. What is the length of one leg in this triangle? So by one leg, what this is asking for is we are looking for this value. And if you do recall, 이건 이제 삼각형 이제 특수각이 될 건데요. 자, 이 90도 그리고 이게 길이가 이제 똑같다면 what are the angles for this going to be? It's going to be 45 degrees and 45 degrees. So if you do recall, for 직각 이등변 삼각형, the ratios are fixed. It's going to be 1, 1, and root 2. If we take a look at this and put one leg as our variable, basically 94 point is going to equate to plus if we organize this, 이거를 정리를 해보게 되면 it's going to be L equals 94 plus 94 root 2. At this point, all we need to do is to rationalize this. 그렇게 되면 if we put L on the left side of the equation, 94 plus 94 root 2, 2 plus root 2. We simply need to multiply To rationalize this, we simply need to multiply this for both top and bottom values. So in this case, if we solve for this, we're going to get 4 minus 2, we're going to get 188 plus 188 2 minus 94 root 2 minus 188. If we solve for this, this basically becomes 2 over 94 root 94 root 2. If we solve for this, we are going to get B. B is our answer. So moving on to the harder questions. Now these questions require us to make sure that we are able to establish the equations and we're able to plug in these answers. So let's take a look at this. So for the harder questions, it's very important that we are able to identify exactly what we need to know to solve these questions. If you look at this, we have two equations, and if we are to graph this equation, we get a pair of perpendicular lines. Which of the following pairs of equations also represent a pair of perpendicular lines? We have two values that we're not sure of. We have A and B. In this case, if these two equations are perpendicular, basically the angle for the first equation times the angle for the second equation needs to equate to -1. So for this problem, when these two equations are graphed out, they are perpendicular. What that means is that the angles for these two equations, when multiplied, will equal -1. If we solve for the first equation, it's y minus 5 over 7x. We do not need the other value. And second equation is y equals minus a over b. These two equations, when multiplied, 5a, 7b equals minus 1. So basically, a over b equals minus 5 over 7. And we simply need to plug it in for all of our equations. So for our first, and we just simply need the angles. So from the top, y equals, or the first angle would be y equals 10 over 7x. We just need the angle, so we're not going to calculate the other part. Y equals, it's going to be a divided by 2. bx. So when these two are multiplied, basically we get minus 10 over 7, and then multiplied by a over 2b. Because we know a over b is 7 minus 7 over 5, what we get is which will get us 1, not negative 1. A would be incorrect. Moving on to our second equation, it's going to be y equals 10 over 7x. Our second equation is going to be y equals minus a over 2bx. In this case, if we input the variables and then multiply these two angles, we get minus 1. Hence, our answer in this case is going to be B. And because we've written out our equation and our work, we're able to identify that B indeed is our answer. And when going over, we will be able to make sure that our equations and our calculations are indeed correct. So for this final question that we're going to take a look at, it's the 27th question of one of the harder models. We first need to identify exactly what we need to know. If the system has no solutions, it has to satisfy two elements. First, the angles, the slopes for both of these equations need to be identical. And second, they need to be distinct. So we're going to simplify our first equation just for the sake of for the calculation to be easier. We're going to multiply this by the 최대 공배수, which is going to be 최소 공배수, which is going to be 12. In this case, it's going to be 18y minus 3x equals 8 minus 18y. If we simplify this, basically what we get is 36. Y equals 3x plus 8. If we simplify this, if we want to get the angle, we're going to divide this, and we get 1 over 12 x plus 36 over 8. Now we have the slope for our first equation. Now we're going to take a look at our second equation. For this, we simply need to multiply 2 to the equation. We get x plus 3 equals 2py plus 9pyx. So if we want to put this in the same format as our previous equation, we are going to get 2py equals minus x we're going to get 2py equals x minus 6. So if we want to simplify this and get the angle, we're going to y equals 2p x, and then we get minus 6 over 2p. Now basically for our first requirement, we needed both angles to be identical. In this case, for this to be identical, we need 1 over 12 to be 2p, and then p is going to be 6. Next, we wanted to make sure that these two equations need to be distinct. Now, just for the sake of argument, we're going to we're going to plug in 6 to our second equation, which will basically get, if we take a look at this, even if we calculate it, this value and this value are indeed not the same. Hence, we can tell that it is distinct and the angles are identical. Hence, for this question, the answer is going to be 6. P is going to be 6. And then because we have this all written down, when we're reviewing this, we are for sure that we have the answer. Now, to conclude our presentation today, I would like to make sure that you write down all of your work, and B, make sure you plug in all of your answers and make the best use of your calculator. And lastly, make sure you revise all of your answers. With that, I would like to conclude our presentation today. I'm looking forward to our classes in person. And if you have any questions, 혹시 영어로 이야기하는 게 너무 빠르다, 너무 힘들다, 언제든지 한국어로 한번 다시 물어봐도 될 것 같습니다. 그럼 오늘은 이걸로 수업 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.